movie comment and review. We've got White Material, released in 2009, and the movie, if you can hear me above the fucking traffic, is directed by Claire Denis, who's also responsible for the screenplay with one Marie Nadaya, and the cast. There will be a slide called lead role. Maria Vial is played by Isabel Hubbard, and I assume her husband Andre is played by Christopher Lambert, and then they have I assume it's a son, Manuel, who's played by Nicolas Duvauchel. And I'm going to have a quick look at a review written by Roger Ebert in 2010, not Ebert, and Isabel Hubbard, small and slender, embodies the strength of a fighter. In so many films she's an indomitable force, yet you can't see how she does it. She rarely acts broadly, the ferocity lives within. Sometimes she's mysteriously impassive, and we see what she's determined to do, but she sends no signals with voice or eyes to explain it. There is a lack of concern about our opinion. She will do it no matter what we think, but reasons are. And in White Material, she plays Maria Vial, a French woman running a coffee plantation in an unnamed African country. The land has fallen into war both against the colonialists and amongst the insurgents. In an opening scene, a helicopter hovers above Maria, and French soldiers advise her to evacuate quickly. This she has no intention of doing. As it becomes clear that her life is in danger, she only grows more opaque. Hubbard's approach is valuable here because any attempt at a rational explanation would seem illogical. I believe her attachment to the lands has essentially driven her mad. It isn't even her fan. It was owned by her former father-in-law and run by her ex-husband, played by Lambert. Now she's in day-to-day charge and moves with confidence. The way she dresses makes a statement. She likes simple sandals and thin print sundresses that make her seem more at home than durable clothing would. She doesn't even much like hats or sunglasses. She runs through fields like a child. She drives a truck, runs errands, goes into town to hire substitute labour when her workers walk away in fear of the war. There's a scene where she all but tries to physically restrain departing workers, and they try to be reasonable with her. Yes, it will be a good crop of coffee beans, but there will probably be no way to get it to market. Anarchy has taken over the land. Child soldiers with rifles march around, makeshift army stripes on their shirts, seeking the boxer, played by Isaac de Bancourt, a one-time prize fighter, and now the legendary, if hardly seen, leader of the rebellion. When Maria is held at gunpoint, she boldly tells the young gunmen that she knows them and their families. Danger doesn't seem real to her. There's no overt black and white racial tension in the film. The characters all behave as the situation would suggest. Now the director, Claire Denis, she was raised in French colonial Africa and was drawn to Africa as a subject. First film, Chocolate, in 1988, was set there, and also starred the formidable Isaac de Bancourt. Both it and the film draw from The Grass is Sinking, Doris Lessing's first novel. The idea of a woman more capable than her husband on an African farm. Denis's 2009 film, 35 Shots of Rum, dealt with Africans in France. She doesn't sentimentalise Africa nor attempt to make a political statement. She knows it well and hopes to show it as she knows it. Hubbard's impassivity perhaps suits her. The character never expresses an abstract idea about the farm or Africa, and the nearest she comes to explaining why she won't leave is asking, "How could I show courage in France?" No one asks her what that means. We meet the ex-husband and his father, but the other major figure in the film is the son, Manuel. This boy is in his late teens, seems prepared to spend all his life in his room. While his mother manages the farm, he projects indolence and total indifference. He cares not about her, the farm, or anything. Events cause him to undergo a scary transformation, but it's not one we were expecting. He doesn't move in a conventional narrative direction, but laterally, driven by inner turmoil. This is a beautifully puzzling film. The enigmatic quality of Hubbard's performances draw us in. She'll never leave and think she will probably die, but she seems oblivious to her risk. There's an early scene where she runs in her flimsy dress to catch a bus and finds there are no seats, but she grabs onto the ladder leading to the roof. The bus is like Africa, it's filled with Africans. We're not sure where it's going and she's hanging on. Okay, so there we have it. Early frames, beginning, we find what appears to be a dead African in a room with some other young men in a room, and it appears that the man's described as the boxer, which earlier is the legendary leader of the rebellion. We then see the lead character, Maria, running down a track, and she tries to flag down first a sort of pickup truck, and then a much bigger sort of truck that's being used as a sort of bus, and eventually she gets on the back because it's full up, and hangs onto the ladder, refusing to go to the roof, which is also full. The dialogue is in French with English subtitles. The bus is stopped by soldiers, and she is subject to a Q&A by one of them, and is the soldier isn't too enamoured with her, and suggests that she's part of the corruption within the country because of her attitude, which appears to be quite polite, but we then see her on a motorbike, and we get an impression of a woman who's at ease with the freedom of the open space, and away from the contraptions of urban areas of towns, and is clearly in love with her surroundings. Then we have a sort of sequence where she's remembering coffee plantation. Some of the coffee seems to have been scorched, and then there's this bizarre scene where a helicopter flying low has a guy on it shouting out to Maria Weil that it's the last opportunity for her to leave, the place being unsafe. But this message is delivered in such a bizarre fashion. It would appear that the French army have been supporting the government against the war with the rebels, and now that the rebels are gaining more and more of an ascendancy, the French have decided to depart, and they are giving this message to Maria that she should depart as well, but she resists. And then we have this odd scene where we've got, I think, a government army guy hiding as a truck goes past with the rebels, but it's not awfully clear whether it's that or whether it's the other way round, a rebels guy hiding from the army. This guy was clearly sort of being isolated from his group, his soldier group. Then manages to
find a deserted sort of small hamlet where the only thing alive seems to be a horse, and he grabs some water and takes the horse, and as he leaves he sees a line of bodies that have clearly been lined up for assassination by gunpoint, and these are clearly civilians, so again, still not clear who's responsible. Is it the rebels or the government? Very atmospheric. There's some extremely intoxicating music and visuals of a sort of hamlet, small town that's been torched in part, where things have been left, or the place is largely unpopulated apart from a few in uniform, with smoke following the torching of various, one assumes, houses. But it certainly creates a sort of chilling picture of war between these two factions. We then see that the increased violence in the area has had an impact on the Africans who are helping her with the coffee crop, and we see her desperately trying to persuade them to stay, as she just needs to have one more week before she can cut the crop. But they're frightened and they are leaving in numbers on their bicycles to serene flute music. We then see a number of young boys, most with guns in their hand. Some of these boys look as young as 8 and 9, and they're walking through a sort of wasteland, presumably to check out an area for food, for other things to survive, and they obviously are part of the rebellion. The boys come across a guy, the guy we saw earlier, who was acquired a horse, and apparently he's the inspiration for these boys. He's described as the boxer. We also saw him at the beginning of the film, apparently dead, but maybe he was just sleeping. Once again, you have to piece together your own interpretation of what you visualize, because it's not always clear in the, I suppose, the curios of the director, who doesn't want to make it too simplistic to understand. Maria then acquires a vehicle from one of her close sort of workers who hasn't fled yet, and heads back into town trying to recruit some more, and she's quickly stopped by a group of child soldiers on the road. We then meet the husband, played by Lambert, who's mixing with the politicians who are protected significantly. Just take one glance at the array of guns in the sort of lobby area of the rather grand house that he clearly works from, and there's a discussion about him and his wife, and the fact that they're separated, and the husband points out that the plantation as such is actually worthless now that the rebels are close at hand and going through areas with their determination to overthrow the government. It appears from the discussion that Andre has borrowed quite a substantial amount from this politician friend, and the politician now is basically saying it's time to pay up, and the land, the plantation, would in part be payment for what he owes. I'm not quite sure who this character is. And from the Internet Archive, there's quite a number of people in this film who aren't credited with any name in the film, so it's a little bit sort of difficult to fully understand who's who. Maria has to go and recruit some new workers, which she does because money talks, and they're all desperate to have a little because of issues like sick children, like one in a motorbike. And then as they head back to her plantation, she goes via a school where her husband's son learns. I think his name is Jose. He's half caste, and she obviously looked after him. And then Andre turns up, and the boy goes with him. The locals are quick to criticise Maria's son, who appears to do nothing but stay in his room. She is quite defensive about him, although she knows deep down that he is a bit of an enigma. The plantation is chained up, the gate, but that hardly looks adequate if either faction, the rebels or the government soldiers, appear. Later, a discussion between Andre and Maria. It's clear that their relationship is strained, although currently they're not separated, and she's aware of her husband talking with the mayor who's creating this militia and talking about the plantation. She is pretty insistent. She wants to cut the crop, and is convinced it would increase the value of the land. Her husband, who describes seeing some boys with a machete and a gun, and he's clearly visibly quite anxious, and suggested that they might well have been after their son Manuel, and he wants the family to return to France. But Maria is pretty determined that that's not in her wheelhouse. The son Andre, eventually starts to be more mobile, and he decides to take a walk on the wastelands, which lays himself open and vulnerable to the child soldiers, and they'd already taken advantage of a sleepy Andre by stealing a trinket or two and a chicken. Now they find him out in the wasteland. They have got weapons, he hasn't, and they're obviously very curious at the sight of a Western young man wearing gold jewellery and displaying all the sort of parts of wealth that symbolise the colonial power vis-a-vis their nothingness, so to speak, in terms of materialism. So the boy Andrew could be accused of curiosity killed the cat, and that possibly is where he's heading. After his scary encounter with the boy soldiers, Andre, when he returns back to his home, he retreats to his room and finds the shotgun and finds the bullets, and he appears to be retreating into a rather dark space. Andre metamorphosises into Travis Bickle. Anyone who's not familiar with Travis, he was in the Scorsese movie Taxi Driver, and midway through the movie he decided to convert himself into a skinhead white supremacist armed to the teeth, and this is exactly what seems to be happening with Andre as he terrorises the maid who's working at the place. Andre tries to get his ailing father, who he'd promised to give the plantation and the house to upon his passing. Andre wants him to sign it over now, but his father's wise to the fact that Andre owes amounts to the sheriff, and that effectively he's giving it away to the sheriff and demands that he find out who's paying. Of course no one's paying because Andre owes debt. Things are starting to turn for the worst as the child soldiers, who are often become more and more desperate, and they include girls as well. Manuel becomes part of a discussion between Maria and the sheriff whilst they puff on a joint. A moment of calm before the storm, although they seem to both have a view that he's slowly going insane. Maria, as she walks around the town with bodies everywhere, realises, I guess, that she's been caught up in a state of anarchy where both sides are using the gun to try and impose themselves, but no one's actually really making any progress, but the body count is rising. Manuel appears to have joined the boys' soldiers, and they pillage a sort of chemist, grabbing things at will, and Manuel appears to be animated and alive more so than any time in the film, albeit that he's becoming a a target for, one assumes, the government for his outrageous sort of behaviour. To be reminded, the boxer is quite seriously injured and holding up in this house, and the rebel boy soldiers, of course, are wanting to find him, and the government forces are also wanting to find him. Pharmaceutical drugs stolen by the soldiers and Manuel are used as sweets, really. Of course, they're taking, one assumes, uppers or ones to help with sleep. The rebels seem to now be occupying Maria's house, and when she gets a lift with the government, they refuse to stop near her plantation. Too dangerous. At the end, I suggest that you try and work out what's really happened. It's puzzling, to say the least. Which side's on which side, and who's loyal with who, and it's anarchy.